the White Oak Basket Gathering, Reaching Beyond Traditions. You've heard from these wonderful voices today, and we're going to talk about so many other beautiful things in this next hour, so we're super excited. My name is Camille Maria Acosta. I'm the Folklife Specialist with the Kentucky Folklife Program, where we focus in preserving, presenting, conserving all cultural traditions in the state of Kentucky. So we're so excited to be talking to you all today. And this panel, we have some stars that you all have heard from already. We have Sue Williams, round of applause, Marianne Smith, Bill Smith, and Scott Gilbert.
We do have a
Somebody knows Scott. All right, so this wonderful panel, we're going to be talking about knowledge sharing, discussing the different roles played by basket makers in their communities, including how knowledge is shared between makers and generations, as well as how makers market their works to the public. Now, I'm going to talk about each and every single one of these wonderful people again. Sue Williams is a master basket maker, award winner, and teacher from Morrison, Tennessee. Williams will present on her role in the White Oak community, including learning from local and Appalachian regional artists, teaching at regional schools, and the role of fellowships in promoting basket making. Now, Marianne Smith and Bill Smith have been weaving white oak baskets and preparing weaving materials from tree to splits for well over 25 years. Currently residing on the coast of North Carolina, the Smiths were resident basket makers at Tannehill Historical State Park for over 15 years, and previously taught at John Campbell Folk School for 20 years. Marianne and Bill also taught at Aramount School of Arts and Crafts and the Alabama Folk School on numerous occasions before retiring from public teaching in 2020. Marianne works in tandem with her husband Bill Smith in carrying on the Alabama tradition learned from their mentor and basket-making great Jessie Thompson, as well as remaining active in her local guild, the Coastal Weavers. As presenters, Marianne and Bill will discuss their roles in the White Oak basket community, including knowledge sharing and marketing of their work. Last but certainly not least, Scott Gilbert studied basket making with Ollie and Lestel Childress, generational White Oak basket makers from Park City, Kentucky. He began teaching workshops in 1984 and continues passing on traditions today as webmaster, photographer, and artisan for the Basket Makers Catalog in Scottsville, Kentucky, and with the Mammoth Cave Basket Makers Guild in Hart County. Scott will speak about his role in the community and maintaining basket-making traditions throughout the southeastern United States. Alrighty, so I know I've asked this question of you all. This will be the third time already today, but just in case we have any new faces, or if you want to include any other information, what brought you all to the world of basket making, and more specifically, white oak basket making?
Well, for me, it was how beautiful the white oak baskets are, how durable they are,
Right.
all the many different styles that you have of them, and learning from different teachers. I've also learned that there are different ways to prepare the material, even between regions.
Right.
You have the Ozark basket makers, which prepare the material totally differently than we do, and then the Appalachian style, which is what we do.
Right.
But to me, I like functional baskets, and white oak is among the most functional because of their durability.
They're strong, real strong.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what drew me to basket making, my dad was a hobby woodworker, so we grew up in his wood shop making sawdust and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But when I saw, and we had a basket from the coastal plains of North Carolina growing up, we kept our blocks in. So I kind of drug that around as a kid. But when I saw the lady at the flea market in Nashville, Tennessee with her white oak baskets and talked to her a little bit, I said, this sounds, for some reason, sounds interesting and sounds like something I could do.
Right.
And years later, I finally figured out how to do it. But we got a book from the library, and I learned how to do that a little bit. Then we met Ollie and Lestel Childress, and I went up there about every other week, and we'd work in their kitchen and just talked to them, got all their stories. and just watched how Lestal made it look easy. So I thought, oh, this is easy. Of course, you know, because he made it look just effortlessly.
Yeah.
So I've tried to emulate him, and finally I can get out there, and it's still hard work, but it's not that bad. So that just the fact that I could do something, and I was looking at it as a way to make money. Okay, I can go out and get a tree. You don't need tools that much.
Right.
You can make a basket and sell it on the open market. And so me and Beth were young and at our age, we didn't need much money. It was something I said, I'm going to try this. And I'm still trying it 40-something years later.
Right.
So.
Incredible.
Well, Miss Gertie taught me right to start with, so I've tried to carry on what she taught me, and I have revised a lot when I'm teaching, which some of my students here probably wished I had not gone to such extent doing it. But it's just important that tradition needs to go on.
Right.
Just one more generation.
Well, speaking of that, there was 400 families or so that Anderson Children had documented. He grew up in Hart County, but he said in the Hart County surrounding areas, there's 400 families in the 50s that were making, and these were not the rich people, this is the ridge runners, only the poor people made baskets. We talked about that earlier.
Right.
And I think the same thing in Cannon County. There's
Right.
probably 2 to 3, maybe even 400 counties down there. And so that tradition is, you know, there's less than 20 families probably in Hart County, and Sue says it's just only 2 or 3 people
Yeah.
in Cannon
Down
County.
there, one that's still making it, and I'm over in Warren County, so.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's a huge drop. But in the 80s, there was lots of people,
Yeah.
and the Childresses we learned from were 5th generation basket makers. They're now up to 8th generation, and those kids are about to have, they've got young basket makers growing up, so we'll be on the 9th generation here pretty soon. So they all know how to do it,
Yeah.
and they will show up for the Hart County White Oak Basket Contest sponsored by the Family Medical Clinic. And Dr. Middleton started that contest because he was working with the poor people from Cub Run. They had low self-esteem, and they were always sick and always coming in. And he got this with some other doctors and said, can we somehow build up their self-esteem? He says, if we have a contest and tell them what they're doing in their spare time is worth something, maybe they won't be so sick and they won't have to be the doctor.
Yeah.
And that's where the contest has been going on 30 years, or 26 years. 26 years now. And he keeps adding different categories every year, so we're not, our county doesn't adjoin Hart County, so I'm in the visitors category. So more than
Gotcha.
once, people like Billy Ray Sims and friends come and beat me out, so I don't always get first place at these contests. But
I
that's,
did one year.
yeah, you did. Yeah,
I
you sure
did too.
did. And I was proud to be beat by both of you. So that's the tradition that's starting to, like a lot of crafts, the traditional crafts, it's going out. And we talked earlier, it's no longer a utilitarian function that you're fulfilling, it's an art function.
Right.
And so, artists have to have patrons, and Dr. Middleton's one of those patrons. He buys the winners of every category.
Right.
So he's got Sue Williams' baskets up there, he's got Billy Ray's basket up there, he's got a couple of mine on the wall.
And
Right.
Mary Ann's.
And Mary Ann, yeah. And so, I'm kind of drifting off, but that's,
You're answering the question.
yeah. And so that's the tradition
Yeah.
that's slowly dying out, so we're trying to keep that going.
Right.
And part of this is how do you market it? Well, in 85 or 84, 85, Phyllis George Brown started the Kentucky Craft Marketing Program. And Ollie and Lestal were at the first one, and we juried in the next year, and it would go from Louisville to Lexington, different convention centers.
Right.
And then you'd get a booth and you'd set up, and they'd have stores from all over the country come in for one day, then have 2 retail days. So that's how we used to market the baskets. And in our particular case, we're still selling baskets, but we morphed into a basket supply shop, which is all internet-based now, and that's really the way we make a living. So we've been able to, with baskets, make a living for 40-something years. And every now and then I get to make a basket and sell it to Dr. Middleton or somebody else.
Oh, that's really cool. That's amazing. I want to get back to that note, just like the monetary value in that strange world of selling
Oh, okay.
art and things. But Bill, what brought you to this world?
Well, to be honest with you,
My wife wanted to do it. And like a good husband, if she wanted to do it, I was all for it. But I enjoyed it. And I don't believe there's anybody that likes to run the mouth any better than I do. And so one other unique thing about getting into being a basket maker is you don't have to have a whole lot of tools. The only thing you really had to have is a hatchet, a couple wedges, a butcher knife, and a mallet. Now Scott, he does a little bit more high tech than I do, but that's all you got to have. And so a lot of crafts I've taken over, got involved in a little bit. Some of them took thousands of dollars to get in, to do it. But with basket making, it's just a few simple tools. And we was lucky, we got to work at a historical folk school in Alabama for 16 years. We worked there 9 months out of the year, every weekend. There would be a weekend or two that we'd be gone, and literally, we had an apprentice that was older than we were that would fill in. We taught him, and he would fill in for us. But the unique thing that I got out of sort of being a basket maker too was all the people that came to the park and would just sit there sometimes literally a half an hour and watch you and ask questions, you know. And there was one particular lady, I worked on Mercedes as an electrician, and Mercedes had a lot of people from Germany, and this particular woman, she was fascinated about how you strip that wood out and made baskets. And that woman came back quite often for 2 years. And right at the last, when she came back, she said, I've got something fixing to be made in America. And she was fixing to have a baby. So I thought that was sort of cute. But I'd give her little things, little pieces of wood, and she would take and make like little seat things out of them, you know. But I mean, it's just amazing how the public sometimes, when they see something like that, and know it's dying out, and they're just fascinated and want to learn. They don't want to necessarily learn how to do it, but they're interested in watching you and everything like that. So I think that was an enjoyable period of time. But the good thing about that, they kept us, the public kept us supplied with the white oak. It's hard to come up to white oak, but teaching every weekend, people would come up and say, where'd you get your trees? I said, that's a good question. I said, when people ask me that question, I'd say, anybody that'll give me about 4 or 5 trees, I will make them a basket for the trees. And that kept us going for 16 years. That one comment. There was always, about the time you think you weren't going to have any more white oak, somebody would come in. But another unique thing about that, we would go anywhere for a white oak tree. We'd go to Mississippi. We would go 100 or 200 miles. If somebody said they had trees, we would go. And most of the time it was a wild goose chase. But we never, if somebody said they had some, we'd go.
Yeah, the technical part of that, you're looking for about a 20 to 30-year-old tree, 6 to 8 inches at the butt, and it's as straight as you can get it, and you only get the bottom 8 feet, or maybe 7 feet, because then above that, the tree gets brittle, and it starts getting branches, it gets real knotty. So you're looking for this perfect little tree, and then even then you got to cut it down. It always gets stuck up in the tops of the tree. And then you got to carry it back. You might have walked 200 or 300 yards to get the tree, but now you got to get back to your truck. And so we split the trees out in half in the woods before, so me and Beth could carry them back. So that's all part of it.
Yeah.
And you've got a certain length of time. It's like produce to split it out.
Right.
And you can bury it in the ground and put straw bales or wet leaves on it. It'll keep it for a year or so.
Right.
Some people waterlog their trees in a pond, and I tried that one time. It just makes it smell real bad.
Oh.
And slimy.
And slimy, yeah, definitely. So that didn't work. Don't,
Don't do
and
that.
all the books say you want the slow-grown trees on the north side of the hill. Well, Lester Childress says that he wants the fast-grown trees on the south side of the hill. And the way I've learned from him, that is what you want. If you get a fast-grown tree, you can get down to one ring of growth in the splitting process and literally split that into, again, so that's two pieces from one ring, or maybe split those again. I've got up to 6 splits from one ring before, from one of these special trees, a very fast-grown tree.
Yeah.
Now, not every tree you get, you might get a nice tree that's real brittle. It won't make the final split, as Leslie used to say. So it's you're working down to a thin piece of wood that's flexible.
Right.
Then you can, just like anything, plastic or wood or pine, whatever's flexible, you can make baskets out of it.
There was one other unique thing about working at this park. People, I was outside working. People would come up and watch me 10, 15 minutes, a half an hour, walk in the side, and she's making a basket. And you know what they'd ask her? Where do you get your splits from? I don't know how many times they asked her that question.
And I would tell them the guy outside gives me a good deal.
That's incredible.
Now, as far as marketing, you had a really unique situation. There's
Yes,
other craft
we did.
cabins there. And then pretty soon you were making homemade soap.
We had ready customers.
Yeah, and it was a state park.
It had a ring nest, and it was always there. How much, you know, our stuff.
Yeah, you could lock it up during the week. We didn't, I don't think there's an opportunity like that in Tennessee or Kentucky. We were doing craft shows where you take your tent and set up, and if it was the big show at Berea, you know, it's about $150 a weekend, which is,
And we did some of that, but
Yeah.
we had that all the time steady thing. And because it was a historical state park, people were coming for the history.
right.
And we had other crafters there as well. And so every cabin had somebody in it. And so, you know, if people came, they were interested in historical things. So that
So that was
was.
just ideal.
Right.
You know, if I'd been younger, at the Airmont Craft School, they have apprenticeships or
Yeah,
work
yeah.
study.
Yeah.
And Bill Griffith, who's just retired,
Mhm.
set all this up, 27 years ago. I said, man, if I wasn't married and I knew what I knew now, I would love to go spend a year at Airmont doing nothing but making
Yeah.
baskets. And they have it set up where people, one or two people a year do that.
They do.
In whatever craft that they've chosen.
I
So
think
there's
they have
opportunities
4.
out
I
there.
think they have 4 apprentices every year.
Okay, so it's grown.
For the whole school.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And they have, you know, what's,
I know they have 3. I think they have 4.
and it's one of the craft schools of all different disciplines in America. You got Airmont, Pendleton, North Carolina. Alabama had a school at one time.
They do. They still have it.
Haystack up in Maine, is that right? And,
Campbell.
John C. Campbell in North Carolina. What's the one, North?
Northhouse.
Yeah, North House. Our friend Joe Campbell, she teaches up there every year. And I've looked at the pictures and it's beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
So you've been there?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. So these schools are all over. If you're interested in whatever discipline and you got a week off and a little bit of money, you can or get scholarships. You can go and learn how to do whatever you want to. And so we've had the opportunity at an historic place in Rugby, Tennessee, is an historic English village from the 1880s. So we taught there twice a year for 22 years. So again, it was a really good place to go. They'd put you up, feed you, and we'd charge everybody so much, and we took a profit, and the nonprofit organization at Rugby made a profit. And so after 22 years, I finally said, okay, that's it. I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
But so you got to find these opportunities that are out there.
One thing about Alabama, the Tannehill, when we first started, they were 10 different craft people. And it got down to about 3, that was really.
Yeah.
When that kept dying out. The older people died out, the younger people just didn't fill it in.
Now I think at one time you got paid to do this.
Oh, you would, yeah.
And you said over the years, as the state budget went down and down and down, that y'all got less and less and less.
Yeah.
Well, anybody knows that the government's involved in it, the first thing goes is art.
Yes.
And when we first started there, at least we got minimum wages where we sold anything, not so, we knew we was gonna make a little bit, but then the first time there was a crunch, nothing. And some of them left, you know, we weren't there for the money. We were there because we enjoyed it. You
But
know.
it also gave you a studio to work out of, where you could leave your things there and
You're right.
know they were okay and stuff.
Well, speaking of, arts funding and arts organizations thriving and whatnot, I've been waiting to ask this question all day, but now that you're all here, what is the origin story for the White Oak Gathering? Where did it begin?
It began in our backyard with 3 people,
Wow.
About 20 years ago.
about close to 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as we met other people, they were interested in coming, and when we moved to North Carolina, we felt like that was too far for everybody to have to come, and so Scott and Beth and Lynn and I and Bill and different ones were just, trying to figure out a place to have it.
We had it at the shop in Scottsville a couple
had
of
it
times.
at your place a couple of times, and Lynn suggested that we talk to the school and see if there was any way that they would do it here.
Right.
And this has been just great, as far as getting more people in. And one thing I wanted to mention, if any of you are interested in seeing the gathering in its youth, there is a YouTube video that Billy Ray did years ago at the house, and it's called White Oak Gathering. If you look up White Oak Gathering, it'll say by Billy Sims, and you can see all of us were talking, and you can see us working, and different ones like that, and you'll see it when it was in its infancy.
Right.
And we'd all camp out, or you'd put us up
We'd
in your
have
house.
tents in the yard, we had people sleeping in the loft
And
of our workshop,
We'd
we
be
had
sweating bullets out in that Alabama
campers.
hot boiling sun too.
Kelly did it in August, didn't we?
Yeah.
Well, we started in March, and it got to the point there were too many conflicts with other things, so we took it to August because that's when nothing was happening for anybody, and it was too hot to do anything. So everybody could come in August.
Right.
So it's grown into this from that, and this was our dream, to have it.
It's almost getting too organized here, working with the museum.
Well,
For me.
it's lost that intimacy that we had at the beginning,
A little bit, yeah.
but it's grown into so much more.
In other ways, yeah.
In other
Yeah,
ways.
everything's
It's-
checks and balances, and it's all
And we still
skewed
have
toward the good
we
side.
still have the close time in the evenings when we're by ourselves, but the core of it has changed a lot.
Well, and
But
we
for
got
the
some
better.
new faces here too, which is really cool.
Lots of new faces.
Yeah,
and
that's
great.
the good part.
Great. And tomorrow there'll be even more new faces probably, because some of them couldn't come for this part, if they worked, they couldn't get so many days
We're gonna
off.
have
and
we're gonna have
stuff.
to have name tags, aren't we?
No, I can't do that.
One thing, Saturday, when we get through, Beth is gonna read a poem.
Yes, we need
Oh,
Beth to do that,
Oh.
because I'll cry if I read it. Beth wrote us a poem one year, and it's so beautiful about our connections with each other. And I read it to every class I teach. I read it to the students, and I can barely make it through it. And I'm not sentimental.
Well, and that brings up
That poem gets me.
like most people you meet in your life, we're not just good basket makers. Everybody is multi-talented, and we do all sorts of crafts and
You're artists.
all sorts of things, and that's really fun. Get together and Bill's an electrician, and I can ask him all these questions, and he knows exactly how to fix things.
Well, I know all of you have had multiple different roles as artists, as you mentioned, Scott, both as students, but also on the teaching side of things, workshopping side of things. So I'm interested, at a base level, what are some of the knowledgeable things that you all share in classes? Say it's the first day of class, somebody has never touched a basket before, doesn't know how to make one. What are some of the first few things you all teach people that are brand new?
Number one is safety.
Okay.
My father worked for DuPont, which is Bill's worked for DuPont. It's all about safety.
Right.
But you're working with sharp knives and hammers, and there's techniques that we teach after we do the safety lecture and get it as bloody as we can. There's safe techniques that you don't get hurt.
Right.
And if everybody's doing what I learned from Lester Childress, it's not too bad. You might need a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
But only in about 30 years of teaching, I think twice we've had to have stitches.
Oh my.
And it was a certain, somebody was doing, not exactly, they were beginners, but they slipped. And it just, so that's a pretty good safety record.
Yeah.
But that happened later on. That's one of the reasons I basically quit teaching so much, because it got to where people weren't listening, or maybe I wasn't teaching properly. And
I doubt
when you
that.
send somebody to the hospital and they come back and all bandaged up, that's not a good feeling.
The first we ever got hurt was right here. And she cut herself pretty bad.
Yeah, that wasn't the first one. We had one at Campbell.
And had to go to the hospital.
They had the
That's
5-stitch
right, yeah.
basket.
But this particular woman here, she didn't want to go. to the
No,
hospital.
we had to make her go.
But
Really?
We was bound and determined that she was going to go.
That was at the NBO conference that was
And the
here.
minute she got back, right back on that
Back
draw,
on that
it didn't
basket.
slow her down at all.
She was determined to finish.
She was going to finish it.
She was determined.
And for whatever the reason, the tannic acid in the oak, I think, when you do get cut, I've never had an infection.
Yeah,
I just
Wow.
I put Band-Aid on, or masking tape, whatever,
yeah.
and just keep going back to work, and it heals up naturally. Have you ever had an infection from a cut? So I think there's something in the white oak that
There is,
helps
it
you.
kills bacteria, and even the utensils, they're saying down at the pumps and things, you stir, if you use the oak, stir,
Oh, it's got a natural
it's got a natural,
antibacterial
Yeah.
thing. Oh, okay, that's good to know. So that confirms a little bit of what I've been saying. We were demonstrating early on at the Adams, Tennessee Kentucky Threshermen's Association Machinery Show. And Mrs. Meggs wanted to bring in more arts and crafts, so we met her and we were down there and had about 10 people around, and I was showing how to do some splits
Right.
and slice my thumb. And so I said, whoops, and I went behind the booth and put a Band-Aid on it and came back.
Whoops.
And the only person left was this 10-year-old kid. He wanted to watch. He still wanted to watch what I was doing.
He's
Everybody
the
else left.
master. That's incredible,
Yeah.
Scott.
It's always good to cut yourself at a show,
You have an audience, I guess.
Yeah, temporarily.
Temporarily.
One of the things that I was passionate about teaching was not in classes where I taught baskets, but we worked a lot with school children about, especially in Alabama, for some reason, the 4th grade, they studied like colonial history, and so they wanted people to come in and teach about that. And the fascinating thing to me was if you taught these kids what the basket was used for, they were fascinated with it. So, and because you're trying to keep these little boys engaged, and they are like, mm-mm. But if you start talking about Indians and how they use the baskets, and fishermen and how they use the baskets, you've got them, And we would take big 5-foot-tall fish trap baskets and big cotton baskets, and I had one that was an herb gathering basket on a walking stick that would have been used by the shaman in a tribe or something. And so they were just fascinated by how they actually used all these different styles. Because in their mind, a basket was a fancy, frilly, girly thing. So if you could show them a way that it was maybe even a life-saving thing for some people,
Right.
they were really interested in it.
How young would you say?
4th grade was usually the ones we were asked to teach.
That's 9 years old.
Kentucky is the fifth.
Yeah.
Sometimes they were younger, but the 4th graders, they seemed to be at a level where they were working on history, they were studying history,
Right.
and so, they could sort of kind of see a way of life they didn't know anything about.
But when Kentucky was doing their folk festivals, 20 years ago at Frankfurt, they did them, I guess, every other year for about 6 or 8 years. Maybe there's 3 or 4 of them. But on Friday, 5,000 school kids would show up.
Mm.
And I was demonstrating by myself. Beth was probably working. But the WKU folk study students would send somebody to help in the booth. And that's why I met Brinkley Orkman, and the year after that met Ann Farrell. They were my student helpers. Brent's the director of the museum here, by the way. So that's how I met him. But you have a lot of kids.
Mhm.
And I'd get out a real thin piece of oak
Mhm.
and get 2 of the boys and have them try to pull it apart. And they
Mhm.
couldn't do it.
Mhm.
So that's how strong. You could pull the truck with one of these things that you can weave into a basket.
Mhm.
So that was always fun. The kids were always. Then you have something halfway woven basket, and you hand it down to somebody they could figure it out. That's no brainer. Weaving is the fun part.
Mhm.
You know, that's the no brainer part. Over or under, if you can do that. Not over, but over.
Well, Alabama, it was the, what was that society there in the Hoover that had
The historical
the
society.
historical society? They built had a little place built at a school, but they would have, certain age school kids come in from all over the county, and they would have several different people. There'd be bees and little everything, and it was just amazing to sit there and watch those kids with their mouth wide open. I mean, they would have, that age, they loved something new, and they would listen, you know.
And it was very hands-on, so they were allowed to touch
They loved
things
that.
and
Tactile.
Mhm. Yeah, and ask questions and stuff, and they really enjoyed that.
So a lot of technical things, logistical things, but also at the same time metaphorical kind of things, storytelling,
Mhm.
narrative. There's a
Mhm.
reason, context, right? There's a reason for these baskets.
Yeah.
And you guys are making a difference by making these baskets.
Oh, what's the one in the Bible? Everybody wants you to make the Moses basket, right?
Oh,
Of course.
yeah.
We have no clue about that in Kentucky.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
Moses lived in a different land, so.
That's right.
But you always got that question.
Oh,
you know?
yeah, absolutely. Well, and Marianne, you mentioning teaching Beth's poetry, right? Like during certain workshops and things like that. What kind of other, I guess, not necessarily, right, like physical, logistical tips, tricks, knowledge do you share with students when you're because I feel like with any art form, right, it's impossible to just stay, ABC. Like but what about A.3, right? Like there's always something else to be spoken about artistically with like basket making.
Well, what we always did, like when we taught at Campbell, the first thing we would do that evening is sit down with all of the students, introduce each other so that they knew a little bit about each other, and I would always ask them, what do you want to get out of this class? Tell me what you want to know when you leave here. And we would try to cover that before we left. Because for some of them, they wanted to learn how to do it to keep on doing it. And for some of them, they just wanted to say they made a white basket, you know.
Yeah.
And for some of them, maybe they wanted to learn how to make a specific basket. And in our class, we let the students make different baskets. There wasn't you had to make this basket. We
Right.
brought 7 or 8 different samples, and
Right.
they could make any of those baskets. Because it was going to be the same technique, it would just be a different size. A different height or width or whatever.
Right.
So, I didn't do the egg basket though. Not my ground one, that was
That's
Susan.
not your favorite.
But we got, we let them choose what they wanted to make.
Wow.
And
You had
That was her
autonomy.
decision.
and no, he didn't want
My
to do that.
decision was we're gonna make one basket.
No, but we didn't.
That way everybody be on the same train.
That makes sense.
No, if people pay, they gonna make whatever they
I felt
want.
like they came for what they wanted to learn, and it wasn't any really harder for me to do it that way.
Right.
It was just kind of keeping up with what they needed to get to the basket,
Sure.
because this one might need more splits than that one or longer ones or whatever.
Right.
So that was the only, difference, because they were all going to make like a rectangular basket. It was just going to be a different size or whatever, a different handle. We'd give them, choices of different handles. But I wanted to know what they wanted to leave there knowing, so that they didn't come and spend all that money and spend a week there and then go home and still don't know what they want to know,
Now, traditionally, some basket makers wouldn't teach family members, or they wouldn't teach an outsider, because the family members were always in competition with each other. If Lester was selling a basket for $50,
Right.
his grand-nephew, Clevie, would sell it for $45, the exact same basket, so he could undercut his uncle.
Right.
So this was not grandnephew, it was nephew. But so that was, so a lot of times people weren't teaching each other. But our attitude was, there's no secrets. Everything Lester showed me, if you're willing to accept it, here's exactly what I learned. And his techniques work, just like your techniques you learned, they work. And your Gertie's techniques work.
They
Yes.
work.
And, you know, you can change it if you want to, but I'm gonna show you the way I learned,
Yeah,
because I know that works.
Well, they can't change it in that class. but
no.
I'll make it happen.
Absolutely not.
Well, and like y'all talked about earlier, everybody's, a friend of mine used to make baskets that break a piece of glass, that's how they scraped it. And or they just split it this way, they do this. And I was, back of my mind says, you do not know Lester Childress. And if you sit in front of Lester Childress, you're gonna say, how the heck is he doing this, and why is he so relaxed and so fast?
Right, right.
And that's what I wanted to do. So I had to learn how he did all that.
Right.
And so I rely on his techniques, and I'm still using the same techniques, and that's what I teach. There's no secrets,
Right.
you know. So that's. But again, you don't always get that in traditional craft. Some teachers, this was on Nantucket Island, teaching Nantucket Island baskets.
Right.
You'd go there once a week, and then a certain week you'd come in, something magically been done for you, and you never figured it out. And they wouldn't teach it to you. Because the teachers wanted to hold back certain secrets because they wanted to make money from the baskets. That's the
Wow.
economic part of it.
Yeah.
You're not going to teach your competition, and you can't sign a non-disclosure agreement with basket making. You know, so.
No, you cannot. Well, and that's another tricky part of it all too, right? When you bring in, monetary value with like art forms, that's very complicated as well. And so I'm interested for all of you that, sell your baskets, have sold your baskets. Well, can you tell me just more details about that, where you sell them, how you sell them? I know, Scott, you and Beth mentioned online, using online mediums and things of that nature.
Well, it started out as craft shows, and then there was a doctor's wife in town, and every time she had a new grandkid, she'd ask me to make a basket. And after about 16, 17 grandkids, she got a lot of my baskets. So that helped me.
Right,
you know.
right.
So you got to have artists need patrons, so you have to have patrons,
Yes.
and you've got to be good enough to have patrons and meet new people, and that keeps you on your toes. And as you're working, you try to get better and better. And in my case, I always try to do something different, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I did a whole basket that was based on the Bhutan architecture of the Zong architecture. And it finally sold to a lady in San Francisco. She loved it.
Oh, wow.
So, it's fun. So I can market weird things sometimes, but maybe somebody wants something traditional. If they're not going to come to me, they're going to go to Sue to get, a real Tennessee, Cannon County basket.
Right.
We had a unique thing where we weren't at this state park. One of the county commissioners, he had a little village with everything, like the he had the barber shop, the general store, every little thing in that village. But his thing was, anytime we came up with a new historical basket, he'd buy the first one.
So that was one of your patrons, yeah,
And,
or customers.
Yeah, that was one of our, and he was one of the commissioners, but, and another unique thing he did, he was retired, and he would carry these people on these tours. He would be the head person. And I guarantee you, he probably bought maybe 100 bark baskets. They're cheaper, and he would give them as door prizes all along on the, and that was another way. He did it, and he had a key to the place. Only thing he'd say is, "Hey, I've come by and left the money, and I've got baskets." that was a good thing right there
Yeah.
too.
And these are poplar bark baskets where you take the bark off about a 4-inch poplar tree, or not too big, and the way you take it, fold it out, and fold it back up, the basket's twice as big as the tree was when you get through. It's a little magical trick. And they're relatively easy to make.
Very easy.
Really.
Very easy.
And I think Native Americans probably did those, and they last maybe up to 10 seasons, but usually 1 or 2 seasons, and you just make another one.
Mm-hmm.
And y'all used to teach that at John C. Campbell?
Taught it to him, yeah.
Okay.
The guy that taught us how, he did it from start to scratch in 5 minutes.
Oh, 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. And that was a tree. The tree's already cut there, but I mean, 5 minutes. He'd take the bark off and hand you had your basket made.
Wow.
My goodness. Well, I know, know you're all wonderful teachers because of everything you've talked about today, and because of all your students that are here as well, right, that can vouch for that. I'm interested because at least like when you have workshops and you're teaching students about basket making, you can really like literally talk to these people, share this knowledge, this vast amount of knowledge that you each have. Is it complicated to do that when you are selling these baskets? You don't really, maybe you don't talk to the customer, or maybe, you know what I mean, it's just sold. There's a little bit of a dissonance. So how would you go about sharing that knowledge through your basketry if you're not there to share it, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Well, most of our baskets we sold person to person. We did a lot of art shows, and we were at the park.
Right.
And if we were teaching a class, a lot of times a student would want your basket because you taught them, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
We only had stuff in galleries a few times, and really the only way you could communicate with the customer was like at the opening night kind of thing. But yeah, it's different. It's different when you can stand there and talk about it and tell them some, you know, some personal things about it and how it was made, and you know, it's very different than just putting your work in a gallery or something, you know.
Right.
For us, it was a lot different.
And most of the time, when we went to a festival, we demonstrated.
Yeah, most of
Right.
ours
It's a
were
little bit easier when
demonstrated
you
festivals.
demonstrate.
And
Right.
people see what you're doing and they want the basket.
Of course.
And usually they want the one you're working on.
That one specifically.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, you
I
want a
guess
piece
that they
of the
could say,
person.
I saw that made, you know.
Yeah, I met the basket maker.
Mhm.
It's a big deal.
Mhm.
You're part of that artwork
Yeah.
in a way.
We met
Yeah.
Jesse Jones, is that his name, from the Appalachian Center for Crafts at Norris? And he brought 10 baskets with him. He was working on the last one. And we got there an hour after the show. The other 9 were already sold.
For that,
And
yeah.
the one he's working on was already sold.
Now, we demonstrated at Norris a few times.
Okay,
Mhm.
that was that's John Rice Urban's
Yeah.
museum.
Yeah.
It's huge.
And if you were there, you would sell everything you had within about an hour.
Wow.
Wow.
And when we were there, way early in the 80s, Earlene Thomas was there
Mm-hmm.
from Cannon County. And she was she was like the Leona Waddell,
Mm-hmm.
because she made really nice baskets. And had a guy from Georgia, who's in that Cherokee, Carol Welch was there demonstrating. Her daughter had a Ghostbusters t-shirt on. I thought that was neat. And so had a lot of basket makers there in the 80s
Yeah.
at John Rice.
When we were there were what?
14.
14 of us,
Wow.
different basket
Okay.
makers.
Nine.
Well, y'all lived in Tennessee at the time?
Mhm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you had your connection, you could go. And
Mm-hmm.
if you've never been to the museum, it's truly an Appalachian. He's passed away. His daughter runs it now, I think. But
And
still,
they called it the homecoming.
that's right,
That was what it
October
was always
20th.
called. Mhm.
Yeah, middle of October.
Yeah.
And Miss Gertie had baskets up there.
Oh, did you?
Okay.
Oh,
Yep.
Of course.
That was a neat place. That was a neat place.
So that was the people were there to because they wanted to be. They were there to, like I said, you'd sell out. They were there looking for basket makers.
Mhm. They came to get historical type things.
Yeah, and you ended up with a Jesse Jones basket that we bought from what's her name in Tennessee. What's her? She was a white oak basket lived in Murfreesboro. Woods.
Oh, yeah,
Woods.
Trouble
Yes.
Woods. Mhm.
She had 2 of these, and we bought one, and we already had one, so we gave it to Sue. So you've got a Jesse Jones, and he had a very unique way of totally kind of a more northeastern Tennessee way of putting it together. Big wide splits, big wide weavers, big wide ribs, but tight.
Mhm.
Just beautiful basket. And again, so we're not even talking about the Virginia, Tennessee, Appalachian baskets. This is Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky style baskets. You know, that's a whole nother genre in the way they made those. And you know, there's some world-class basket makers up in that area also.
The first day we was there selling our baskets. And I don't know if we were demonstrating there or not. Butcher,
Jesse Butcher.
Jesse Butcher. First thing he done is come up to us, he looked at the prices, he said, you need to double those prices, you sell them just as quick, but we didn't. We get in the beginning,
He was right,
we
though.
gave our baskets away. Really, you know.
And you had Kathleen Dalton and Ken Dalton from somewhere near Sweetwater, Tennessee, that area. Did you ever meet them? But he was the first basket maker I met that had a basket
You
in.
guys are older than I
No.
am.
we met, he was up at the Columbus Winter Fair in 1983, and he had a basket in the Smithsonian at that time. But they did
Wow.
rib baskets. His wife did a lot of twill. She'd space dye her reed or white oak and do twill baskets. Just beautiful, you know.
Wow.
And that was revolutionary back in the early 80s.
Yes, it was, yeah.
And Ken did really Tennessee, Cannon County style baskets with the bow tie and those little tiny ribs. But he had one basket had 60 ribs on each side. It was just like an 8-inch basket.
Mm.
You've seen those.
Mm.
Now you've probably made them, but I've never made one that fine.
That's a little bit too many.
Well, throughout today, you know, I think the topic of how important the arts are and the unfortunate reality of arts funding getting cut is so prevalent today. And because of things like that, like these arts organizations, right, these workshops, these demonstrations are so necessary and so important for the survival of basket making arts, folk arts in general. And so I'm curious, why is knowledge sharing about basket making so vital today with arts funding being cut, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, it's a different world now. There's lots of YouTube videos. Whatever basket you want to learn, there's a good YouTube video out there.
Right.
Now, me and Billy are still working on the best white oak video. We haven't got that far yet. There's other information.
Right.
So it's different. Before you had to go meet somebody, go one-on-one,
Right.
or go to a school, and those things are still viable ways to learn. So maybe there's more information than people are learning out there that we know of. Of course, it still doesn't help the arts funding.
Sure.
You know, it is unfortunately the first thing that gets cut a lot of times. And if you look at all the data, I'm gonna get up on my soapbox. All the data
That's fine.
says that the money spent on arts works, and it works better than almost anything else the government does. But it's still, people don't do it all the time. So anyway, I'm off my soapbox.
One other thing too about that video you can watch, there's nothing quite like when somebody can put their hands on it and show it. I can see something like that and it don't do me a whole lot of good. But if I can put my hand on it and get involved in it, then that's one way of learning.
Right.
Well, I could go back to Lestal every couple of weeks. I'd go up there and I'd be practicing all week. And finally, I learned how to sharpen my knife to put a little wire edge on it, they call it, or a burr edge, and you could scrape and it makes the scraping better. And so I said, "Oh, Lestal, I learned this." He says, "Oh yeah, everybody knows that." I said, "Well, you never told me that." You know?
He thought you knew.
And so that's one of the things we teach the students. Now, here's a different way to sharpen your knife
Right.
that makes this. In the white oak process, the knife stays still on your knee, and the wood does all the moving.
Right.
So that's why it's a safe. Even when you're carving, your knife stays still, and it's very safe and a very powerful technique, and you're not going to get hurt.
Right.
But if the knife's moving, you're going to get hurt.
It'll happen.
Yeah. So anyway, that's one of the. And we're not demonstrating here tonight, but it's a lot of muscle work to do the white oak, but there are very safe techniques. I tell my students, if you're straining, quit straining and get a bigger tool. You know, because I do that. I find myself trying to force something, and I have to
Right.
back up and say, "I'm gonna get hurt. Let's do it right."
Right.
That goes back to the safety thing. So the second thing you do, we'd take everybody out in the woods and we'd go find a tree, we'd cut it, drag it back, go to lunch, and we start getting the wedges out and busting. It's called busting the tree open.
Right.
And it's called timber. Unless we call it a piece of timber, and you're working toward a flitch of timber, and then you're splitting those, making splits, not splints with the end, splits. That's the Kentucky way to pronounce it.
Splits.
The guy that we met in Alabama, he called them sticks.
He called his tree
A stick of timber.
A
Stick of
stick.
timber.
Now I've heard Les will say
And
that
he used a
too.
tiny little tree.
He
Because,
didn't get over 4 or 5
yeah,
inches.
tiny little
He
tree.
cut it with an axe. He
Cut it
couldn't
with an axe,
drive.
he wouldn't use the
His
chainsaw.
wife would drop them off somewhere and come back and pick them up later on.
Well, if you're in good shape, you can drag a small tree out. But if you get up about 8 inches, you got a 200-pound tree.
Yeah, and we've carried many of those out.
And you get a lot of product. One tree got out of near Columbia in Hohenwald, Tennessee. Well, you're familiar with that's where the homesteaders came in the 60s, the Gaskins farm. So a friend of ours had a farm down there. And from the distance, I saw the tree, and it was a fairly big tree. And so we went and got it, and I let it sit around. I had a class coming up, and I let it get darker and darker and darker. And before I finally figured it out, and we got 9 pack baskets, full-size pack baskets out of that one tree.
Mm.
And so it ended up being the magic tree. But those are rare.
Yes, they are.
Two more questions before I turn it over to the audience. I'm curious. What was, your workshopping and the gathering like during the pandemic?
We didn't have it during the pandemic. We had to cancel 2 years.
Wow, okay. Did you all ever do any workshop like online or anything of that nature?
We actually taught one class at Campbell during the pandemic.
Okay.
It was a mentorship program, and there were only 3 teachers. Was it three? Three teachers on the whole campus and 9 students on the whole campus. That's all that was there. So everybody had a private house. The lunchroom was set up completely differently. You never touched your food. I mean, usually you make family style, but this way they put it on your plate and handed it to you. They had disinfecting stations everywhere. You had to wear a mask and
Doors open.
keep the doors open, work outside as much as you could. But that worked well for that. They got a grant to fund the entire thing, and so they asked several of us. Sue went, and they asked us to teach this group of students, and they really filtered out those students. You should have seen some of those resumes of those students. But we didn't get to choose the students.
Right.
The school chose the students.
We
but-
didn't get to choose, but Mary Ann told the students, if you think you've worked hard this week, you wait till next week. There was a student that didn't show up the next 2 weeks because
She
She'd been
didn't show
scared
up.
off.
She didn't deserve to be there.
She was not a worker.
Oh, okay.
And we won't go into names, but she was not a worker. Yeah. But anyway, we had 2 really good students. But yeah, and that was a unique opportunity for the students because everything was paid for them.
Wow.
And they got 4 weeks of white oak basket making. So by the time they learned, they knew how to do it.
Whoa.
We taught the splitting out process.
Yeah.
Sue carried on with the splitting out and doing the egg basket. We did a more, like a twill work basket, just a very simple basket. Sue did an egg basket, and then the last teacher taught them Native Americans dyeing techniques for their
It would be
basket.
sort of like that back
So they got, the whole gamut of what they needed.
Well, one of my students at Rugby, Tennessee, this is Bobby Edwards, who lived in Jamestown, and he says, I want to come over and learn how to do white oak basket making. It was during the class.
Right.
And he's probably the one person who, the next year, he was helping, he came back and helping everybody else run splits.
Mm-hmm.
And you know Bobby, and his baskets ended up being world-class. He learned, that's the one person I can think of who kept it going for 10 or 15 years, and he'd go to craft shows, go down to Cannon County. And Billy Ray Sims, here's a student, if you Google white oak baskets, who's going to show up? It's not me, it's Billy Ray Sims on the website. So anyway, but he just took to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've lost touch with him. I don't know where he is now.
I don't know, he quit coming to Cannon County maybe because of me being down there, I don't know.
No, not, he was such a nice laid back,
Well,
in my opinion, yeah.
he was doing Kentucky style.
He had a mixture. He did the Kentucky style tie, learned from me, but he used the little ribs like in Cannon County.
Yes.
He had his own little,
Right,
so he wasn't technically Cannon County.
right.
Yeah,
He was more East Tennessee than
yeah,
Middle
yeah,
Tennessee.
yeah. But again, I've lost touch with him. He used to have a nice website and,
I haven't heard anything about him in a long time.
yeah. So anyway, but that was one of the, he was always fun to see him and talk to his wife and everything. He's one of the nice people we met in the, this basket industry, so to speak.
One thing that the family it did, it didn't help us, but what Mary does a lot, these women, and mostly the women, put on these different classes, and it's all over, you can explain it to them, and they might have 10,000 students, and they ain't left their studio, and they get paid big money.
Yeah. But that's mostly paper art.
I know, but I mean, that's what the pandemic, it did help.
It forced
some-
people to find a
a
new way
different
to
way
teach.
of teaching.
And it could reach a broader audience in a stranger way.
And the students were staying at home buying all
Right.
sorts of supplies.
Ah,
and-
there you go.
and they had time to do stuff.
Mhm.
So a lot of creativity was done over the 2 years.
It was honestly a lifesaver for me to have something to do.
Right.
Because you couldn't go anywhere, you couldn't be with people, you couldn't do anything, and it was huge. But yeah, we had to cancel the gathering for 2 years in a row.
Both of them were here once.
I think so.
Mhm. Yeah. So last year was the first time we had it here, even though we
Wow.
planned to have it in 2020.
Right.
22 was the first time we were able to have it.
And you got a Kentucky Humanities grant to put so this is a new addition to so-called share with the public, because the gathering is just kind of for the friends of the gatherers.
Right,
If that
right,
makes sense.
right.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
yes.
this is, I'm thrilled to see, I think
Yeah,
it's a
so
really
this-
good crowd.
This is a new addition.
You guys are popular, so people want it to be. And hear your wonderful stories, of course.
Well, and the museum has been doing a good job blasting everything out on Facebook. You know, it's a lot of work.
It is.
It all looks real simple. It's not. It takes a lot of people to do these things. So thank y'all very much too.
Thank you all. It's been a pleasure. My final question before I turn it over to the audience, I'm just very curious. What is one piece of knowledge, and this may be difficult, but one piece of knowledge that sticks with you that is just so essential to basket making and keeps you going, inspires you, keeps the tradition, all the things we've talked about today? What is that one piece of advice? And it could be from any of your mentors
Well,
or
the
students.
KET TV from 1993 interviewed Ollie Lestle. And Ollie says everybody is put on the earth for a purpose.
Mm.
I was put on the earth to make baskets, cook food, and can fruit. So that's what I try to live by.
That's incredible.
All the children.
I love that. We need to make you a T-shirt that says that. That's great. Sue? What were you put on this earth to do?
Okay. Comments, what can I say?
I would say find something you love doing,
Mhm.
something that excites you to wake up to know you're going to get to do it that day.
You have to have it's kind of cliche, you have to have a passion.
Yes, yes.
And it's not all fun and games.
No,
It's hard,
not.
it's hard
It's
work.
hard work.
And
It's
somehow
hard
it
work.
seems worth it. So.
It is, when you look at that finish, and to me, it's never been about the finished product. It's getting there.
The journey.
The getting there is the.
When I get-
Because I like to know process. I
When
like to do
yeah, when I
things
get
from the
finished,
ground up.
I'll take that basket and I'll set it on a table and just look at it for about 2 or 3
Yeah,
minutes.
yeah.
And remembering, how the heck did I do that?
I remember we had a student one time at Campbell, and he had taken a lot of classes, and he said he had never finished a basket in a class. Well, he finished this one. He was so proud of that thing. And I said, well, where are you going to put it? And he said, on a pedestal. He was so proud that he
Was
finished
that
that
the
basket.
judge?
No, this was the symphony conductor, the guy that
Oh, wow.
he couldn't conduct symphonies anymore. He's losing his eyesight or something, I don't remember. But he had never finished a basket in a class, and I said, well, you're going to finish this one. And he did.
Well, and with all the students we've taught, it doesn't matter if you've never made anything. You can learn how to make a basket.
Yeah.
And it's going to work when you get through. And you tell the students that the first day, and everybody kind of scoffs at you. You know, we're not going to get through with this thing. And then at the end of the week, and when we were doing read basket, our students were doing 5 baskets a week.
Mm-hmm.
And they went to show and tell that John C. Campbell just covered up a whole table.
Oh, yeah.
On the whole stage sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, I got 2 things.
Okay.
When I retired, I was a union electrician. I went down to the union hall. They had what we call them the old geezers day. All retired people go down there the first Wednesday of every month, and we get to sit around and eat donuts and then get carried out for a free meal. Well, I was down there one day, and I didn't even remember this person being my apprentice. Because you see a lot of people He come up to me one day and he said, I know you're a basket maker. We need somebody to teach this electrical class. And what the class was doing was teaching people that came out of drug programs a way to get back into life, you know. And you talking about somebody hard-headed, I'm hard-headed. I reckon for 5 or 6 years, Scott put on a technique of putting a burr on the scraping knife. I didn't pay him no mind. I knew how to do that part. Well, after about 5 or 6 years, and I saw what he was doing, I finally said, hey, I believe that works. So what I do now, when I'm scraping, I've got 6 scraping knives that I use. And I sit there, and one thing, when I work, I've got a bench right there beside him. I don't believe in bending down. I've got everything laying right there at a certain height. I've got those 6 scraping knives. I put a burr on those 6 scraping knives, and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. When they're all dull, I sharpen all 6. And that,
Not near the water.
and
No,
near the
near the
water. But it's just unbelievable what that burr does when you scrape that piece of wood and you don't see no shaving comes off. It's dull.
You're actually cutting the fibers instead of making sawdust.
That's right. And if you don't see the shavings, there's something wrong. But it took me 5 or 6 years. Well, I was saying, I believe he knows what he's talking about.
In the chemistry lesson, we talked about this earlier on Sue's basket, but steel reacts with the tannic acid in the oak and makes a natural dye, which is a gray color called iron tannate. Maybe the earliest natural dye from some people that goes way back before everything else. But you don't want that on your basket, but usually it ends up as little spots. So Sue, you use distilled water because you don't want any iron in your water to react with the oak, because your splits will get gray looking and not that wonderful white color.
Right.
So there's a reason you don't sharpen, you don't want steel. And so when we're using bandsaws and stuff at work, we'll get a bunch of sawdust and just rub down the table saw or whatever to clean it off, and that neutralizes everything. It seems to work. So.
Well, used to, I was working in a lab and I had alcohol on my hands all the time. And if I worked on a local basket or anything, my fingers would turn pink.
Huh.
I never did figure out what it was.
A friend of ours was on antibiotics, and it must have his sweating that summertime. He could touch a new basket and have enough iron in his sweat to leave a thumbprint on his basket.
Oh.
So, it's all, and old timers didn't really care. You might soak your basket out in a horse trough, and if they turned black, it didn't matter. Just that's what you
What you
made.
was gonna do was take it to the garden or
Yeah.
sell it?
Now, there's another thing about that glue dough. If you take a iron trough and you put those splits in there, they're going to turn blue.
And you can use that as a design element
Well,
in your basket.
we have had carried baskets that we've had, and we would have to go back home and do them intentionally because somebody wanted that. It looked just like a pair of dungarees, don't it?
Yeah,
Color.
I took a bunch of splits and doped them up with tannic acid from sumac berries, then went from that to a bath of copperas, which is iron sulfate, and got iron tannate. And I did a whole series of gray baskets, and I'd take some madder root and had one little row of red in there. And so I thought that was real cool at the time, Now I'm kind of like Sue. I just want to use just heartwood and sapwood. That's what you make your basket
That's
from.
right.
Well, do we have any questions from the audience? I know they've said a lot of wonderful things today.
And enjoyable.
Incredibly
thank you.
enjoyable. Thank you all so much for being here today. We really, really appreciate it, and we've all learned so much. And we're really excited to finish out our last narrative stage with Micah and Emily. It's going to be wonderful. But let's give a round of applause for these.
Thank you.